Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to the Reserva Forest Foundation Forest Walk. Where we're standing right here used to be all pasture filled with cows, but you've probably seen a picture of that already. Come on. It's called the hoja de estrella, and if you were here you could smell it. It smells like licorice. It's usually a little quiz I give everybody, or anise. And it is of that family, but it's actually highly toxic. But the indigenous people here use these leaves, and they wrap their fish in the leaf, and then they wrap it again like this, and then they wrap it again in banana leaves and throw it in the fire, and when the fish comes out done, it tastes like anise, and it is so great, and by cooking it, it loses its toxicity. This is called the ortiga. And just at this time of year, it gets these little berries on them that all the birds and everyone likes. It's actually a nettle, stinging nettle. And each of these is filled with just water. Boop. Yeah, with a small seed. All of this area was pasture for cattle up until 1998. Still about 60 cattle on this property, all bulls that we were raising for beef. And after seeing the destruction that came from this type of farming, the erosion and the use of herbicides to get rid of weeds and everything, we said that's it, we're finished. And we sold all the cattle in September of 1998 and just left the whole place to regenerate on its own. And within a year, it was so amazing to me and to everyone to see how quickly the forest regenerates itself here in the tropics, and it became a real inspiration for me. I saw a lot of different bird species that began to appear that I'd never seen before. So I got a bird guidebook and a pair of binoculars, and I came out and I spent every day almost for 5 years sitting in this forest and walking through it, identifying and documenting the bird species that were here. And in the end, after 5 years, I ended up with 160 different species just here in La Reserva. So that's what you're looking at, a regenerated forest over a 14-year period. You hear that very high pitch singing? Those are called little hermits. They're a hummingbird about that big, brown. And they always live in this area in what they call a lek. It's a group of hummingbirds, and they're ventriloquists as well, so you can think you hear them and know where they are, but you can look and you'll never find them. Venga conmigo. Mi amor. Oh, there you go. He says, oh, don't. Oh, no, no. There. Watch the hole. Now, I'd like to show you this tree. This is a tree that, is a symbol for me of the mentality, the way things have changed in the world as far as seeing trees. This tree is called a chupagorion, or a firebush. It has these long, I'll show you later, this one doesn't have the flowers, but it has long, narrow, orange flowers that are filled with a super nectar. And they're like specially designed for hummingbirds, so they flock to the tree. But not only that, it also, after the flowers, puts out a berry. These are unripe ones, but there's some ripe ones here if you look. black, then all the other birds eat them, the warblers and different species of birds. But if you ask a local person here about this tree, they'll say, but that's just an old weed, that thing. And it's true, it is a thing that grows up naturally in the forest on its own from the seeds that are dropped by the birds, right? But and it only lives to be about 25 or 30 years old. But during its lifetime, and it matures rapidly, it's a super great regenerated tree for the wildlife to eat from. It has much value, and that's why I'm always trying to tell people, rather than seeing, here's some ripe ones, look. Rather than seeing a tree as wood, I would like for people to start seeing trees as living beings and all the good and the roots of all the health of the earth. Okay, so another thing I missed, I began looking at the birds, and then I had so much fun out here, looking at birds, and enjoyed my time out in the forest, that I started thinking, hey, because there was such a financial problem at the time, I thought, I could offer this walk to tourists, because we live in a tourist area, and see how they like it. So people started to come, and they really enjoyed it, and as I took people along the tours, I began seeing baby trees all along those trails. That gave us the idea to pull those baby trees up when they're small, because the majority of them die anyway because they don't get enough sun. Pull them up, plant them in nursery bags, and start a native tree nursery. And we did that and started encouraging people in the area to reforest with all native trees. And we had some private people do it, and afterward that led to the foundation. But I also wanted to show you, like, this plant right here. It's called the night blooming cereus. And this and the orchids and the bromeliads, they're all what they call epiphytes. They're a plant that anchors to a tree with its roots, but it doesn't feed off of the tree like a parasitic plant. It actually feeds off of air and water and just uses the tree as its host. But this is an amazing plant because if you feel it, it's like a cactus. It's a succulent type. And in each of these little depressions, once a year, a little bump will start. And by the time it's done, it's this big. And it's like that big around. And it opens at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And it closes again at 5 in the morning. So in other words, to see this flower, which is that big around, white with a yellow center, you have to be up in the middle of the night to see it. It's especially for hawk moths and bats, probably. So if you look up there, you can see the fruits up there that hang in the double. If you can see them or not. I have good pictures at home of them. Anyway, it's called the huevo de caballo, or the horse balls tree. And it really blew my mind because I love the tree. I don't see any here, old ones. If I find one, I'll show it to you. But they're a big fruit, about this big. And the skin is about this thick, and it's just filled with latex. And in the center of the fruit is a cavity filled with black seeds with an orange pulp when it's ripe. And I've seen the parrots and the monkeys both eat it. They eat through the outer shell, and then they get into the center, and they get the latex all over their beak or mouth, and they eat those seeds. Well, I never saw them on the trails like the other trees, so I started planting them. And I'd plant the whole fruit in a bag, and nothing happened. And then I'd plant all the seeds and take them apart and put them in different bags, and nothing came up. But one day I found a pile of monkey poop, and it was just filled with those seeds. So I scooped it up with gloves, and I took it home and I planted it, and every single seed germinated. That's when I learned the differences of seeds and propagation of native trees. Some of the trees can be propagated from sticks or stakes. Some of the seeds from trees are dispersed by the wind, and you'll be able to tell because they're engineered for the wind. But the majority of the trees here have to be eaten by an animal and defecated out before they will germinate, because they have such a hard shell. And we can mimic that by treating the seeds ourselves, the harder seeds like the Guantacaste and the guapinol and the malinche, by scraping them on the cement on the belly button end and then soaking them for 24 hours, and the germination. I don't know if you've ever seen a sensitivity plant. It's called a dormilona here in Costa Rica in Spanish. But if you touch the plant, it closes up. And if you touch the whole branch of the plant, there goes. Okay? Well, it's called dormilona because of that. It's in the mimosa family. All of the mimosa trees as well, and it's a huge family of trees. They do the same thing, not because you touch them, but every night, at night, when the sun goes down, they close all of their leaves like this until morning. So if you look at a mimosa family, a tree in the mimosa family in the evening, it looks like it's dead, but in the morning it comes back. This is also a natural medicine for insomnia. It'll make you sleep. I have friends that have cured insomnia from it. Oh, and here's the flower we were talking about. See, you can see how long and narrow they are. And down on the bottom is a sweet, sweet nectar, and that's what all the hummingbirds are after. I used to call this the hummingbird tree. Oh, I knew it. And here's where we plant the trees in honor of. They need to be maintained again, but you can see them in here. This is for Reina's father. There are 15 trees planted here that Charlotte and Yorn and I planted about a month ago. You can see how fast the grass grows back, and you can also see the trees in there. The other ones are for Carol's friends, a friend of Dan's. She planted them in January. Plant a tree. This lady planted 4 trees. This was a tree planted for a lady in Norway for her mom who just passed away. And this is called a lorito tree, and it's of the mimosa family. And you can see how the leaves have all closed up. I think it's due to the brilliant sun. It's just so hot here today. Otherwise, it's really growing. And then there are more trees planted here. This is an amazing tree called the guajiniquil tree. It's in the Inga family. And these leaves are one of the favorites of the two-toed sloth to eat when they're fresh like this. So when we have two-toed sloths that we're rehabilitating, we come out and I always will get these little branches off the trees to feed them because they love them. Okay, we're going to go back this way. That's a really good example of a strangler fig. You can see the old tree on the right, and the tree on the left is the strangler that came down and put all of its roots down. It will take over the old tree. It's even bigger than the old tree already. But no problem, because it has lots of good fruit for everybody. typical forest succession, okay? When we first this was one of the most beautiful pastures that we had for our cattle. And when we took them out, the first thing that came up in through the grass is the hoja de estrella. Remember? The licorice plant. And what happens with them, they come up, there's only a couple left like this, but they come up in profusion and they create a canopy right away with the big leaves. Under that begin to grow some of the faster pioneer species like the barrio and the cecropia or guarumo, and you can see them here. These are all barrio. In other words, they've come up underneath the hoja de estrella and up higher and put shade out so that the hoja de estrella has died out, and now underneath the pioneer fast-growing trees will begin to grow the slower growing hardwoods that take many years and they need the protection of the canopy. Inside here is a sweet water that the birds drink, and also the seeds when the flower dries up that they eat and pass on. And in this cubby hole is like an apartment house. And sometimes in the past, but this year I haven't seen it, a puma lives in here. Because you can smell really strong the smell of like a cat spray. I found excrement here 3 years ago, and I collected it and sent it to the jaguar program in Heredia, and they analyzed it and said it's a puma. And the puma, he roams all over. He doesn't need to have an unbroken forest to survive. He roams from one forest to the other, but the jaguar needs uninterrupted large tracts of forest. That's why they're gone. These are coming from the poro tree, or erythrina. There's a lot of them here. And they can also be planted with stakes, or here's the seed. And I'm going to take you home and check them and see if I treat them, as I say, if they'll germinate. Because I've never had luck with them just planting the seeds on my farm. Yeah. Another thing we do here at La Reserva is that we don't clean up dead wood. Unless it's blocking a trail, really a huge tree, then normally we'll just cut a detour path around it rather than cut the tree. Because we found some years ago when we were starting out that 30% of the life in the forest depends on dead wood. And they learned that in Europe, where they keep all the forest cleaned up, all the dead wood, fallen trees, they take it out of there, make everything neat. And for us it looks neat, but they found that like 30% of the life in those forests were in danger of extinction from lack of habitat and food. And you can see, here's an old tree that we've left. This has been here maybe 4 years now. Now it's slowly deteriorating. Here's an old tree that fell many years ago. And you can look in here and see where the animals sleep, use it as a home. And here you can see where the termites have been eating because of the sawdust. Nature's not very neat. It's actually really messy, but that's the way everybody likes it out here. This is another tree I like to point out to people. It doesn't look very special, and you can start to see where the little fruits were. It's called the aguacatillo, and actually all those little things are covered with little fruits that look just like avocados. They're green, with like a little red top. And when they're ripe, they turn black just like an avocado. But they're very important because they're the favorite food of the quetzal, the crested guan, the toucan, and the bellbird. And when we found that we had these here, I started collecting the fruits like crazy, and I'd ripen them in the bodega, and then I'd plant them, and we have them everywhere. We plant them on all of our projects and continue to plant them. Okay, so every orchid, which is an epiphyte, the way they propagate, here's the orchid plant itself, and they put out this thing and the flowers come out on it. This is called a diablillo. I know there's another name for it, but I don't know it offhand. It's new to me. And after the flowers go away, this blooms in the summertime. Then it puts out these pods, and every type of orchid gets a pod after flowers. Different types, shapes, and sizes, but in this particular one, it's a long, narrow one. Over months, as it develops, and then it dries. Here's one that's dried, and you watch. It pops open, and you see the powder? Okay, that powder, which is very light, is dispersed by the wind, and when it connects to another tree, hopefully one or two of all those pieces of powder will become a new orchid. Grow this time of year. If you touch them, they feel almost like plastic. I don't know the name, but I call them little frog cup. And these are naturally occurring heliconia. They come up on their own. Each of these, the birds come and they drink the liquid. Here's another one. And also inside are seeds, which the birds eat. They eat them and they carry them and they digest them, and then they leave them, the seed, somewhere else where they start in a whole other part of the world. And this is called the stilt palm, or the walking palm. You can see the fruits up here. When they turn black, they're ripe, but actually there's not a whole lot of fruit on them. It's mostly just skin and seed. But no, it doesn't matter. The birds still eat them, take them, and drop them somewhere else, and you have more. The reason they call them a walking palm is because they move over many years because of the root system. When the roots break on one part, they put roots on the other side, so that eventually the plant does move, but not at a rate that you'd be able to see with your naked eye. In linear time, oh, look, here's a fruit. I'll show you just what's there. That's not much, see? The skin. I wonder what it tastes like. That's not bad. And the seed for later. Open it. But after, not good. A bromeliad in flower right now. The crazy thing about these is they only flower like once every 2 or 3 years. And being of the pineapple family, a pineapple is also a bromeliad, after it flowers, it dies. But during its lifetime, it makes babies that take over when it dies, and a new baby will come from the same plant. And 2 or 3 years later, it'll have a flower too. Nice fungus. Many of the species in Costa Rica fungus are edible, but I don't think they have a very good flavor. Like this is a pretty waxy old thing, but it's a different kind. Very pretty. And another example of dead wood. Here's a species that without it wouldn't be able to survive. It's called the antshrike. It's really a cool bird. This tree grows all the way down into the Amazon. We call it a lagarto or lagartillo, which means like an alligator. But you can see the huge spines that it has on it when it's young. And these knobs with the spine coming out. And the spines only go up about 3 meters up the tree and then quit. And actually when the tree gets full grown, and these very sharp spines fall off, and all that's left on the old tree are the big knobby things that stick out. In other words, it's a type of protection for the young tree. If you look here, you'll see this forest. It's about 10 meters wide. It's the first tree bridge that we built on the property. And it was a result of one day milking cows in the barn and seeing a monkey crossing from the big forest that we're going to go into right now over to some trees over on the side where we just left. And he was using the barbed wire fence to get there. And it gave us a light bulb. We went, wait a minute, if he had a tree bridge to cross from one place to the other, he wouldn't have to use the fence and be vulnerable to predators. So that's when we fenced off a 10-meter wide space here and planted it with whatever we could find. But you can see now that it's turned into a full jungle, and the monkeys live in it. The music is loud. Very cool. Here's something else to eat, Yorn. Look, wild grapes, you guys. Whole bunches of them, look. Ooh, this is a really good bunch here, look. They're almost all ripe. Mmm. Want one? And so here's another tree. This is called the Ceiba pentandra. It's a baby, or kapok tree in English. But it's another example of a tree that puts spines out when it's young, and then when it's mature, the spines fall off, and there leaves scarring on the tree. But again, it only goes up about 2.5 meters up the tree in the end. In other words, it's a protection to keep animals from climbing. I'm not really sure, but I know that it's protected. But the other part of the story of this tree is that in a few minutes you're going to see a 400-year-old ceiba, which we named Papa Loco. And we love the tree so much. In fact, that tree was the inspiration for the Reserva Forest Foundation. But the point is, we looked for babies of Papa Loco year after year and never found them. And one time realized there are no other ceibas on the whole property of La Reserva. So we found some babies and we planted 6 here, because so that Papa Loco would have a mate. And the first year after we planted these babies, Papa Loco gave seed. The seeds weren't fertile, but it shows that the intention and his knowing that these are here. Won't be long. And this is a guayaba tree, or guava in English. It's a green fruit I'm going to show you. It has the most beautiful bark. And right now it's mid-July and it's in fruit. It's just starting to fruit here. You can see here some that have fallen on the ground that the animals have eaten. But here's a whole fruit right here. If the ants are eating it too. I'll cut it open. This one isn't completely ripe, otherwise it'd be pink inside. But they use this fruit in the northern part of the world to make like a juice. Here they use it as to make jam. But more than anything, the animals love it. This is like a feast time for them this time of year, because there's a lot of guayaba in this forest. And here's an old colony. It's been here for all the years that I remember, for the last 30 years. The same colony. It's a leafcutter ant colony, and here you can see there are different groups in the community. And these are the miners, and they're constantly digging down inside and bringing out the dirt. And you can see how they stick it together into larger pieces so they can carry more than just a single grain. And they bring it out here and they dump it. Let's see if we can see some working. They must be on lunch hour, I guess. Then the leaf cutters themselves are bringing the leaves that they cut into a tunnel directly into the lower parts of the colony. And number one thing, they don't eat the leaves. They use them as a mulch or a compost, and they put them down there and they grow a mushroom from that, or a fungus, which is what they eat. And here's another strangler fig, and at this point I like to just tell people and show you the importance and the interdependence and connectivity in the tropical forest. Because there are 50 species of fig trees in Costa Rica and over 800 in the world. And each species of fig tree has its own fig wasp. It's a little bee-like thing that enters into the fruit of the fig. And when it goes down into the fruit, the scales are like this in the fruit, so that the animal is stuck inside. And inside she lays her eggs, and when they emerge, and she dies. And when they are born, the males have no wings, and the females have wings. They mate within the fruit, and the males die. But before he dies, he chews a hole in the side of the fruit. And she, in turn, as she moves around inside, is pollinating all the little flowers that are inside the fruit. And when she's done, she flies out the side of the fruit to another fig tree. The deal is, without that species, particular species for that particular species of fig, without the two together, neither one can survive. Another good example of dead wood. This one's still standing, but you can see where the woodpeckers have been working on it. It is filled with grubs and bugs for them to eat. And here you can see the sawdust where the bugs have been eating. Also, someone living down inside the roots. Aha! You can see, this is a full-grown, over 400-year-old ceiba tree. We named Papa Loco because he's the biggest, strongest tree in the whole forest. You can see where he's leaking liquid, Alan. The tree retains liquid, and in certain times of the year, they burst a hole open, and the water drains out. I've drank the water from those. It's very good. To me, it seems sacred, because it was a sacred tree of the Mayan, and he was standing here. Here's where the idea for La Reserva Forest. God, that's awesome. Thanks to him, we've been able to plant over 70,000 trees in Mayan. Another interesting thing about a tree like this is that in the top, or the tree itself, is home to over 2,000 species of life. They live in the branches, they live on the sides. You can see all the growth, not to mention all the insects, frogs, birds, and other animals that live in here. Without Papa Loco, what would they be? Evicted. Foreclosed upon. Beautiful flowers in the forest come from the vines that are way up in the tops of the trees. Here's an example. It's a little bit beat up because I found it on the ground. But oh, it's so beautiful. See if I can find a better one. We may. I think they're oh, what is this? Well, this is the pod then that the flower emerges from. Check that out. Feel it. Really nice. Here's a good flower. Here you go. Take it. Here's a good one. Look. Oh gosh. Aromatherapy. So here's a example of transformation in the forest. Okay, this vine that you see running up the tree is called the monstera vine. And when it's down in the basement or the floor of the forest, it clings to the tree and doesn't use a whole lot of energy until it gets up. See there? And there's even one of the cicadas stuck on there. But the leaves, when they get to where they have light, they become big like a philodendron leaf. And so it puts out a bigger leaf to catch more sunlight. There's also a tree called the papa tree. I'll see if I see one, but it's just the opposite. When it's in the forest floor, it has a three-pronged leaf. But when it gets up to where it gets sunlight, it develops just a single oval leaf. And here's an amazing tree. This is called the chicklet tree. In other words, they used to use this as like a stickum or a glue, and they'd cut like a V-shaped cut in the bark or in the trunk, and then the latex drains out, and they would collect that and use it for like a gum type stuff. But one of the most amazing things about this tree is these are the babies. And every year when the seeds fall, the babies grow. And so much I have wanted to replant this tree, but if you pull the babies up like we do with all the others and put them in a nursery bag, they don't survive, none of them. And we haven't been able to figure out how to get these out to transplant elsewhere and get them to survive. But there's so many. Yeah, because this is an example here of forest reparation, or, okay, in 2008, 4 years ago, the biggest, most strongest wind that we've ever had here was 111 miles per hour hit. And when it came into the forest, it went into certain parts like a tornado and just completely thrashed everything in the way. And this is one of the areas right here. In other words, 4 years ago, this was completely bare. Everything was broken and barren. Within 2 years, it had a canopy again. That's how fast it can repair itself.